here at the Memorial Union for Center for East Asian Studies. So nice to see you. Been on the Zoom call for a long, long time, and especially nice weather. And so I really appreciate for you to share this amazing experience today. I'm the director of Center for East Asian Studies, Mieko Ikegame, and they know the center has a long history to serve as the resource center for University of Canada since 1989. And we served to promote East Asia to KU community and beyond. And we tend to focus on really not only so far China, Korea, and Japan, but because of the age of today, maybe international and regional borders, just to think about information, technology, capital, and people. So we recently decided to a new theme for our Center for East Asian Studies, which is Asia. So by global Asia, we mean any of the nation or the region, but it goes beyond those regional in many different areas, political, economic, military, and also music or Japanese technology, or a number of things go beyond these national. So we invested in this kind of way of thinking about Asia more inclusively. So today's talk is an important benchmark for that thematics, especially not only intellectually, but Mieko Ikegame, who is today's lecturer, helped us to how to implement. Okay, one thing, like conceptualizing global Asia is one thing, but how would you do it is another thing. So here he is today to help us to give us some ideas. So Mieko Ikegame is the former director, United Nations Office of Under Secretary General and Special Advisor on Africa, OSAA. She is one of the first Japanese women who worked high up the United Nations. I just learned, of course, there are so many people working for UN, but only a few people who are actually employed as a civil servants. And she was one of those people. And she was an employee of the United Nations, worked on international civil service over 30 years. She was featured in Newsweek's 100 world-renowned Japanese women. She is also winner of the 2015 Academic Society of Japan's International Division Academia Prize. She is currently serving as Special Advisor to the CEO of African Union Development Agency, or NEPAD. Lecturer at the University of Tokyo, visiting professor at Yokohama City University, not the end, senior consultant for private sector companies in Japan, US, and Africa. Senior advisor for Japan Society of Africa. Just imagine how friends are king of African countries, ambassadors, and CEOs. It's just like an amazing world. I was just like learning. So here's a little bit of her background. She's a graduate of Tokyo Women's University in Japan, Simon Fraser University in Canada, and University of Stockholm in Sweden. Since she joined the UN in 1980, she has held a number of key positions in the UN Secretariat, the United Nations Development Program, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN, FAO, and the World Food Program. The major tasks in these positions aimed at mobilization of international support. Mobilization of international support is something remarkable to me for socio-economic development of the developing countries, especially through development cooperation, policy advocacy. She has in-depth knowledge and experience on the country level, as well as such intergovernmental and interagency mechanisms as General Assembly, Economic and Social Council, Security Council, and Chief Executive Board of UN system. Throughout her UN career, she has dealt with a total of 28 African countries and 15 Asian countries. Currently, she's a special advisor to CEO of AUDA NEPAD on global advocacy of Africa, undertaking lectures at academic institutions, business communities, and general public, as well as high-level consultancies for major corporations of globalization of market and public-private partnership. I have to cut a lot here because I can just keep going on and on for the entire day. But I highlight as strategic mobilization of international support, networking with so many different amazing organizations like World Bank, UNDP, and AUC for Africa's development are useful to all of us, regardless which field we are in. So, just briefly, her partner, the husband, Mr. Takeo Shibata, I believe many of you know him because he has contributed so much to the University of Kansas and also Kansas region. He's a former Japanese Consul General in the U.S. government's Kansas City Consulate. He has also served for the United Nations International Fund for Agricultural Development in the turn of the 21st century. He was a member of the UN Food Relief Program and was part of a delegation that visited North Korea. He also was a member who prepared for the International Conference of Environment in Kyoto in 1996, resulted in Kyoto Protocol to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Beyond his contribution to the UN, he was an ambassador and the consul in Nigeria, Zimbabwe, and Pakistan. He has served, as I said, as the first chancellor's lecturer in 2006 at the University of Kansas, teaching courses on the Kyoto Protocol, regional integration, and development in Africa, so on and so on, a long list, so across disciplines of economics, law, East Asian languages, cultures, political sciences, and business school, just to name a few. So we are so lucky to have both really powerful people in the world here at the University of Kansas, and this event has been widely sponsored by so many different units at the University of Kansas. So I have a special thanks to the sponsorship from Global Business Studies, Institute for Leadership Studies, Kansas African Studies Center, Office of International Affairs, Center for Global and International Studies, and Department of Political Science. But on a personal note, Elaine Dwell, who is really made this entire event possible, so I really want to give a special thanks to Elaine. Thank you. So like my introduction can be much longer, but I'll give this mic to Professor Mieko Ikegame, and this is broadcasted to the entire nation and beyond, of course, global Asia. So some people are watching from Japan. So I hope all enjoy Professor Ikegame's talk. Please welcome Professor Mieko Ikegame.
Well, thank you very much for extraordinary introduction for myself. It sounds really great person as I am, but I am really not. I'm just a simple person on this earth. And what is all written in a formal CV, you are not that much interested, but you're interested in how did I get there? Because you're studying, preparing yourself for the future career. So my task today is I'll give you some of the tips of my experience, but at the end of the day, it is you who has to make the decision for your future. So I wanted to emphasize that. Also, I wanted to introduce a concept of the tea ceremony in Japan called Ichigo Ichiya. Some of them knows about it. It's about the moment, but the eternal moment, it will not come back. So to have you here, the first lecture, face to face, and being myself in Kansas, in KU, is an extraordinary moment that I'm here and you are here. So this moment is should be an eternal memory for all of us, and I hope that I can contribute to that. Also, I would like to also mention about what now means. In the United States, people say, even the president will say, it's now. Now, we have to do now. But, you know, now is not now only. As I said, what I am today is an accumulation and moments of my past. And what I'm here to talk to you, the younger generation who will make the future of the world, is depending on how I could influence you individually and from this moment. So the moment in our culture in Japan is not now. The moment of now is accumulation of the past and transition to the future. So I hope that my talk is going to contribute to that concept. First, I have to, I will quickly mention about the focus of this talk. I will talk about UN. You will see I am Japanese and I am woman and I'm Asian. But I am in the United Nations person because more than half of my life has been in UN. And my story is my story. It can't be your story. Your story will be all written and made by yourself. So how do you do that? That is the beginning of the talk. That means you must know who you are, where you come from, what is your background, what is your political background you are in. The minute you go out from the United States, people will look at you as a Bush or Clinton or Biden or even Trump, because you represent the country, whether you like it or not. That is the case. And when I came maybe 20 years ago and talked to students and you said Americans, they said, no, we are not Americans, we are not. The government is something else. That's not the case. Whether you like it or not, there is no choice, but you are part of the country and you represent yourself in the global society, what country you're coming from and what is ethnicity that you are representing. Now the focus is to talk about UN, but I will also talk about how the UN or international society were looking at Japan. As you should also analyze how the international community look at you as Americans or Africans or Nigerians or Indonesians. It's very important the eyes of others looking at you, because that is what you will be determined who you are in the society. Then I will talk about my experience as a Japanese and my experience as a woman and the experience of Japanese women. Some example. Then I will talk about, based on my experience and where we are, my analysis of where we are now globally and where we are going. I will be dead in 20 years' time, or maybe 30 years' time, depending on how long I will be able to survive. But you definitely will be living much longer than me. You are going to make the future of the world probably more than 50 years later when we are gone. So I cannot make future, but you can make the future. I can influence you and give you the ingredients for what you do for the future in 50 years. So that's my focus of the conversation. So let me quickly talk about United Nations, but I wanted to test how much you know about UN, if you don't mind. Okay. So somebody's going to, okay, can you ask the lady with the white mask there, do you know which year? Okay, instead I will ask like this. Do you know which year United Nations was established? Yes, that lady. Can you ask her? Do you know which year?
It was after World War II, 1946.
Good enough. 1945, you're right. It's after the Second War. And what was the purpose? What was the purpose of the United Nations? You know, this was actually established by the leadership of your country, United States. But it was allied countries got together to establish this institution. But what was the purpose for? Can I ask the lady mask? No, the lady over there. Yes. Don't worry. It's orange.
Sorry, can you repeat your question again?
Your question is, what was the purpose of the United Nations when it was established?
For all nations to work together. To work together to make a better place.
Good answer. Actually, United Nations was created after the war so that we will not have another world war. The whole thing is to stop, not to have this terrible thing on this earth. And so the first purpose was actually focusing on the countries, you know, who are involved in the war. So it's a reconstruction of the war, and then to build some ways to prevent from the third World War. Do you know how many member states were there? You know, United Nations is made out of the member countries. Do you have an idea how many countries were? May I have this lady with interesting masks?
I knew the answer to the first question.
Yeah, okay, just an idea.
I don't know.
You don't know. That's a good philosophy of Zen. You must know what you don't know. Okay. What about the gentleman next to her? Can you help her? Just say.
50. At the
Excellent.
beginning, you're
Oh.
saying, right? At the very beginning.
Yes.
It was founded.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you for the right answer, 51. And for your information, in Africa, there are only 4 countries, which is Egypt, Ethiopia, Liberia, and South Africa. Don't ask me why these countries, okay? For Asia, it is India, Philippines, China, which is Taiwan, and Iraq and Iran. Both of them are also the first member of the United Nations. Can you imagine that? Japan, Germany, Italy, they were not the member of the United Nations at the beginning. In fact, you know, in the constitution of UN, which we call it the Charter, these 3 countries, defeated countries, are still called as enemy countries. And these countries, anytime the allied countries determine that they can be a cause of the future war, they can go ahead and attack. And that charter has not been changed until today. So Germany, Japan, Italy, they are still enemy countries. Think about that. Now, after this, decades, we are entering into a decolonization period when the many countries started to be independent. But how do you define independence of the country? I can say, okay, I would like to have Mieko Ikegame as a country, but somebody has to agree that I can have a Mieko Ikegame country. So United Nations became the institution to legitimize the independence of the country. And by that way, UN helped African countries to be independent. And in fact, UN really pushed forward decolonization and get the countries to be independent. So 1960s to 1980s, many countries became independent and they become the member of the United Nations. And altogether, 76 countries during this period became independent, out of which 53 countries are from Africa. So for African countries, United Nations is very critical because the country can exist because of the United Nations legitimacy. Now, in 1980s and the 1990s, rather 1990, what are the major change of world political structure and power structure? Can I ask now the gentleman? Can I ask this gentleman from Africa, maybe? From the line. What had happened in 1990 something? The major change of the international structure?
I think what happened in the 90s was that there were countries in Europe trying to split from Yugoslavia and being independent of their own, like Serbia, Croatia. Yeah, that's what I think was happening in the 90s.
Okay, that's a good question as an example. But what made them to be independent? New countries from East Bloc. Okay, somebody was talking. Can you help out?
USSR collapsed.
Sorry?
USSR collapsed into like 15 plus countries.
Yes, that's right. But it is not only collapse, but it is the end of the Cold War. So it was very important. Before, Soviet Union and United States had a, so to say, the power equilibrium. And they were fighting for the political ideology of the governance of the countries, right? So once this is finished, mainly because Soviet Union dismantled, what is left is only United States. So United States became the power of the world. And people started to be worried what's going to happen to the rest of the world. And in the United Nations, we thought that maybe Islamic countries might be merging to counterbalance it. But we have to see where we are going. I will talk about it later on. So all these years, there have been the changes in the international power structure and in the United Nations from the reconstruction of the result of the Second War to decolonization and then realization of the global peace and security and development are only possible when all other nations beyond Western countries are going to be as developed as other countries. We have interdependency of our economy and society of all these nations. So that's a very important thing to think. So today, how many countries do we have in the United Nations? Can anybody raise the hand and answer? Yes, gentleman over there.
193.
Great, correct. I'm impressed by the student of KU. Even the Tokyo University student make mistakes. 120 years, something. Okay, so 193 countries. But the governance of the United Nations remained the same from 1945. You know, the members are almost like 4 times, but the governance remained the same. You take, for instance, like a Security Council, which you see on the television with the flags and buildings in Europe. They talk about conflicts in different countries, peacekeeping operations. You know, 193 countries are the member of the General Assembly, which is the whole thing. Do you know how many are in Security Council members? It's only 15. And out of 15, 5 are the big powers, you know, with the veto. That is, they are, you know, the allied countries who won the war, which is US, France, England, only 30 minutes, oh my goodness, Russia and China, right? This has not been changed, and they don't want to change it because they want to remain status quo. And all these years, since 1973, the United Nations tried to make a reform of the Security Council. Never worked out because there is a lack of leadership, you know, on a global scene to have the consolidation of the opinions. So that's a kind of limitation of the UN. Where are we, Japanese? I mean, it's only a few people are from Japan, but let me tell you, Japan was a very unique member state. They joined in 1956 after the US has left Japan. Japan was occupied by US, as you know, and the US helped our constitution construction. And it is a group of Americans who made the constitution of Japan today. This is going to be reviewed later on, but this is what the fact is. So when US left and the constitution was established, Japan finally became a member of the United Nations. Incidentally, the same year, Ghana of Africa was the first country became independent to join to the United Nations. It's a similar time. And they, at the time, Japan was contributing only 0.1% contribution to the UN. But in 1970s, Japanese economy went up and it became the second contributor to the UN. Japan was a recipient of the aid. You know, I'm beneficiary of that. I used to have a school feeding program. And at school, we have to drink American milk, which we hated, you know, but I'm beneficiary. Also, you know, the like a Shinkansen, that was actually on loan. So Japan borrowed the money from the World Bank, but we returned the money much quicker than the mature period. So that makes Japan different. So from the developing countries' point of view, it's a very strange thing. All the developed countries and donors are Western countries. Here is Japan, which is Asia, and which was defeated country, enemy country, and was a recipient of aid. All of a sudden, become the second donor for the developing countries. So it became the model of the success story of economic development for many of the developing countries. And with that, Japan was expected to play a role of the facilitator and negotiator between North and South, donors and developing countries. So it was a very, very special position Japan had. And of course, these things will reflect on me being a Japanese international servant. They expect me to be able to do that. I don't want to get into more details on this one, but let me now talk about my experience in the UN, because I think you might be most interested. When did I learn what Japan means to me? Was when I made the first mission to Africa. I was to go to Lesotho, which is in the middle of the South Africa, And I was accompanying French American professor of university. I don't remember which university. So we fly to South of Africa in order to catch the plane to go to Lesotho. I don't know whether you know where Lesotho is, but you have to go to South Africa first to catch this plane. So we arrived there, and this flight is only 20 people with propellers, and our names are not in the list for the flights. So the customer of South Africa said, well, two ladies, you can't go, maybe we can get you tomorrow's flight. So you have to stay overnight. But you know, South Africa was banned by United Nations because of the apartheid. We were not supposed to stay there. But they said we can stay at the airport. There is a hotels. And but the hotels are all divided between colored and white. So here is a customer. Show me your passport. So I couldn't show them. They said, I say right. I told them to UN. I showed the Japanese passport. Okay, you go to white. And I thought, oh, white, I colored. White. Okay. Maybe because of UN. So the American professor from France was showing her passport. Oh, United States. They were looking at her and said, you go to the colored. So she was sad. She just been to the southern France for the nice summer vacation, totally black, Santa. So it was the skin of the color determined which hotel she can go, although your American passport. She was angry. Junior officer from Japan. She's apparently not white. She goes to white, and then I go to the color. What's that? Matter of fact was that Japan, because of the economic strengths, were considered to be honorary white. So we can use all the facilities of white people, but you can't marry with white person. I realized, oh my goodness, the passport, Japan means that much. And this, the conclusion of the story is that he made such a big thing, Latin blood. She says, we are going back to Rome, to our office. And I said, I can't, because Lesotho, the country who needs our system, we have to get there. So there was a big scene. And there was a couple, white couple from South Africa came and said, here is our ticket to Masiru in Lesotho. Please write on. We will stay back. You should go to that mission. So that was an extraordinary experience at the beginning of my career to realize what Japanese means. Now, what does this role of ethnicity as a woman? Many of the meetings when I attended, by the way, it was less than 10% of the professionals are women overall. For Japanese international civil servant, it was less than 5%. Today, do you know how many Japanese women versus Japanese men? 62%, beyond men and beyond average of the UN staff. You may wonder why. I leave it with you for your homework. But to be women is quite a difficult thing, because you go to the meeting and you are probably only women, and if there is any women, normally it's a Western women. And here is a Japanese woman. She's supposed to be very subordinate and let the husband to speak. You're not supposed to be a public speaker. And here is me sitting there. I'm youngest of the 3 daughters in my family. My mother said to me 3 things. There is nothing boys can do that girls can't do. Secondly, if the boys hit you once, you hit them 3 times. And thirdly, which is very important, any problems outside of the house, never bring back home and say you couldn't deal with it because you are girls. You must not come back with tears as a girl home. You have to resolve the matter outside. That was my mother's token. So I had this principle always, and I go to the meetings. Maybe you're youngest woman there. I will make sure I will say something. I will give some message. But in order to give the message, if you wait, then all other people will say. So you have to make the opinion, as a taking into consideration of all others what they say. I have a strategy. I take the floor very early stage so that you prepare yourself and you express yourself in the meeting. People all look at you, you are a woman, and they would like to pick something wrong in you. So I have to prepare myself, politically correct language, which was a very difficult thing to do. But by making mistakes, I learned to be able to do that repeatedly, many, many times, repeatedly in the meetings. And the interesting thing is, if you're a woman and the Japanese, very, rare commodity, they will listen to you. They'll be bored, but if I open the mouth, they will listen to you. It's surprising, but that means you can really turn your weakness into a strength. Because you're a woman and they try to pick you, you are criticized, but you can also bash back that your voice is heard by these people. So that is the meeting. Next thing, my experience was working in the World Food Program where they give the food aid. So I don't know, do you know the country called Bhutan in Asia? Okay. So Bhutan used to have like a temple schools, the traditional temple schools. Children go there in the temple and learn. So the king, who had a really vision for the future, said, "You're going to establish modern elementary school where children are going to learn English and the teachers are going to teach everything in English." So the king was establishing all these schools, but no children. Of course, who's going there to learn English? What for? And the parents, they are helping us for the farming, helping for the household. What for the children has to go? They don't see the value of education. So they wrote to United Nations World Food Program and said, "We have a program here, can you help us?" I was a desk officer for Bhutan. So I fly to Bhutan and see these places and interview the parents and so on. School feeding program where I was a beneficiary. I said, why don't we introduce school feeding program? At least children can eat something, right? So the parents can also appreciate that children have some food. So we did that. We increased the attendance of boys by double, but the girls never show up because girls are more useful at home. So I have to use imagination. Being a parent, how can I be encouraged to send the girls? Because if you send the girls and the girls are educated, she herself benefit, her children will benefit, entire family will benefit, then the community will benefit. So teaching one girl has a triple benefit, but why they don't? I thought, how can we use the food aid to attract parents to send the girls? So my idea was, when the girls come to school, they can have a school feeding, but they can have take-home ration, a sack of rice. So the parents, we better send the girls. They will come back with rice. So the girls' attendance became triple or 4 times, and I got a medal from the king. But it's was a struggle for me to come up with this idea to give the ration, but I appraise myself. I came up with this idea. Now this is a model for the all developing countries where women, the girls, are not coming to the school. The school feeding program, work program has a component of take home all over the world, Latin America, Asian countries, African countries. So the little idea I had could create and contribute to the wider world, right? For the women's education, world education. Another example is when we went to Sierra Leone. Do you know where Sierra Leone is? Raise a hand who knows where Sierra Leone is? Two people? Okay. Of course you know. Of course you know. It's West Africa, small country. So United Nations was asked to come and help the rural development. So we went there with a team. So we have to go to the rural areas, right? But we wanted to also tackle the problem that women has in the community. But of course, male experts are not going to ask these things. It will be much easier if the women experts are talking directly to the women in the village. However, how are we going to talk to them? Okay, after 2 days trip to the jungle, we finally find this community. The local consultant is a male consultant who is negotiating with the chief of the village to get women get together to meet with us. After 2 days, we went 2 days there, and then 2 days negotiation, chief finally agreed, okay, they can come and talk to our women with one condition. We have this community hall with the roof. The women can be gathered together, but men will be surrounding them. So I said, what is that for? They said, we want to make sure that views expressed by them will be neutral and represent the community. So we get there, and the women were all there, and the men were around. So we asked the question, ladies, how is your life in a community? What kind of problems do you have? Because we are here to help you. One after another, they said, oh, we don't need any help. We are happy and, good weather, this and that. We are really happy. So we don't need any help. So after the talk, I said, and the old boy, gentlemen are all smiling. I said, excuse me, by the way, where do you get the water? Who is carrying the water? The women started to talk, looking at each other and said, well, of course it is our job to bring the water to all families. But it's a bit too far and it's a long distance. We really suffer, after that. So they started to talk about their problem. Then the man started to listen. No, that's not true. The well is very nearby there. And there is, they're over exaggerating this. So I said, who is carrying the water? Are you carrying? You are drinking. You're not carrying, man. You see the women carrying 2 hands bucket, 1 bucket on their head, and having a little child with another hand too. And maybe she has another child in her back, and maybe she's pregnant. So the same distance for women and men are different. It's the same distance, but the role makes it different. This is what is very important. United Nations, through my work, I can facilitate the conversation of the different interest group, which might be conflicting with each other. And at the end of the day, we said, why not then we will help you to make the well nearby to the village. And all men agreed, that's a good idea, that's a good idea. But the process at the beginning was fighting. men and women. Not the true, that's true. But somebody in between can come and say, how is this? To get the other part to understand the needs of other part. And eventually you will have a win-win situation. And it is because I'm a woman, and maybe I'm not Westerner, the African ladies felt a bit closer to me and talked to me. So these are some of the examples you could really make a difference. But there are things which you can't do. One example is about DRC, Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo. Who knows that country? Okay. Lady with a mask, with a red mask, yeah. What was the previous name of DRC? The country had a different name.
Here,
Good. I'm glad everything is really. Okay, Zaire. Zaire is one of the largest and richest country in African continent. Is that right? They have lots of resources. But because they have lots of resources, everybody wants it. You know, France gets it there, Belgium gets there, Americans are there, and so on. Conflict never finished over there. So I was organizing international conference on DDR. DDR means disarmament, disintegration, and integration program, meaning that you disarm as a soldier and you get out of your team or your tribes and then integrate it into the larger society. And there are 20 countries were invited to exchange how successfully they could do it. So I thought I better go and see with my own eyes, how do they do that? So from Kinshasa, which is the capital, we had to go to Kisangani by UN flights, airplane, which was provided by Russia. And first, they will explain to you, safety net and what to do with when the emergencies and so on. There were 15 passengers, but this safe jacket were only 10. And then the door, one of the door, when it flew, it fell off. So we are holding ourselves in the plan. So we arrived in the Kisangani, which is really the middle of the continent, but a lot of markets are going on. I had 8 officers accompanying me, but we had to pass the river, Congo River, huge. And they told me, we have big fish. I know Japanese people, you like fish, but these fish are so big that they are the size of elephants. I said, my God, why is it possible? It's not a whale or it's not a tuna, which is in the ocean. We're talking about the river. I came to learn this is because of the conflict, and many people are dead, and the dead bodies are thrown into the river. So the fish were eating them, so they become huge. I mean, I can't eat sashimi out of that. So anyway, we are on a big draft and the car arriving to the other side of the river, and there is a big chief command waiting for the gentleman and other people to accompany me. And it was in a jungle with lots of small rains are going on. So they said we have to hurry up. These soldiers are disarmed have been waiting for you for 2 hours in the rain. Oh my goodness, we have to rush. So I go there. I was supposed to just to see how the operation works. But I was there and then immediately asked, we expect you the message from Secretary General UN. And I said, I'm not Secretary General UN. I have not prepared anything, but I have to do this task. So quickly, I have to, formulate what would be the message of Secretary General to the people who have been fighting 14 years, right? And they are different ethnic groups. They used to fight each other, but they were put all together in this huge field and disarmed. There were a pile of the guns there. So I managed this message. Then I'm told by this huge commander, please go and greet the chief of each ethnic group. Wow, this was really something. They are really, you see the eyes are shining as they have been fighting and now fearful because the group next to you are the ones you have been fighting with. And I'm told for first 1 week, nobody eats because they think they're going to be killed. It is a plot of the government that these people are to be killed. So they don't eat. So there is a lack of trust with each other. The message I gave was, forget about this distrust to each other. Now the country has to work together, this kind of thing. But my surprise was at the end of group, by the way, there were 3,800 soldiers there. See that? The last group was a group of women soldiers. I was really surprised because I heard all the soldiers, from, the male soldiers. What on earth, women are fighting there? So I said to the commander, please do me a favor. I would like to talk to them, but not with others. Please organize me and them alone. So he said, okay, he will arrange. So I go to the room and these ladies, and I said, you are sisters, you are daughter, your mothers. How on earth you're coming to a destructive activities, So they said to me, each one of them, same story, 5 minutes I have. Same story. They said, we girls have to go to the forest to collect the woods for the cooking. We have to go to the river to catch the water. On the way in the evening, they are all kidnapped by the leader of the guerrillas. And they will be used as a prostitution for all the men, male soldiers. And by the time they are physically not useful, they will be drugged and put in front fighter. They don't know who they are, when you're drugged. And there are a lot of children born without knowing who is the father. And you are front for the fighting. So they said, you lady from United Nations, you have to help us. Help us that this should not happen to any women in the world. I was literally shocked. And I said, thank God where I was born. And look at the reality of the world, how the women can be mistreated in this way. They said, we have children, we don't know who are the fathers. This is the UN program, you are supposed to be rehabilitated and go back to society. I can't go back to my village, because I might be there and I might have been shooting my people there. How could I go back to this community and be integrated to society? So I was telling you, this is a moment, it's so difficult to swallow. No matter what, the problem are there to be resolved, and I have no answer to that. So that's my story of my experience in UN. Since I have 10 minutes, 5 minutes? How many minutes you have? 3 minutes. So I had to cut it short. Actually, I covered almost everything what I wanted to say, but I have few messages to you. I thought about it last night. But this is not going to be something that, oh, it's a very important thing I forgot to tell you about my vision for the future, where the world is. Very short, 1 minute. You know that Europe and Western world was the leading, dominating region. That is going to pass very soon. You know, emerging economies. Look at Asia. Look at the East Asia. Look at ASEAN countries. Look at China. Look at India. They are already taking over the international market. Together with other emerging countries like Brazil. So what is going to be the next? That's where my specialty comes from. You know, when the world is going to be 10 billion people, we are about what? We are about 5 or 6 billion people, right? 5.8 or something. When the world population is going to be 10 billion people, do you know how much percentage will be African? Can you guess? Anybody?
60%.
60%. 16, 16
No.
was 60%. Okay, thank you for that. It's 48%. It's a reality. Okay. When these 10 billion people are from Africa, and right now, more than 70% of African population are younger than 25 years old. Average age of Africans are 19 years old. Do you know how much is Japanese? 49. It's not, we are not talking about life expectancy, but the average. So dynamic, you know, young African population are there, fighting every day to get their life better. There is no spare time to think about something else, but thinking better for themselves. And the world has now changed, and we learned from COVID how much internet or information and technology can do to our life. Under the colonial period, Africa was intentionally put aside from the development, put aside for industrialization, put aside from the access to the right to medicine, medical services, put aside for education because it was much convenient for the colonizers to keep Africans in the darkness. But that's gone now. Information technology can give all opportunity for young Africans to learn for the future. I've been to many, almost 30 African countries. And I go to the smaller villages, children are laughing and barefooted, but you know. And there is a little hut with a self-generator. It's internet cafe. Young people go there, you know, and they get all the information they need. In 10 minutes, 5 minutes, they get all the information. They are eager to get the information for the betterment of life. I go to Japan, sitting in the underground, or going to the kindergarten, going to the street. The young people, hair, face, and doing this. Not smiling. You know, they have everything materially, but they don't have the happiness and the challenge for the future, because it is a challenge which makes you to be alive. You know, that's what are lacking in developed countries. Africa, with internet, information technology, is going to be a great nation and power. And in addition to that, they have natural resources. As I mentioned, the world is depending on 60% of our natural resources are all in Africa. And also, when the population becomes 10 billion people, and in order to get this 10 billion people to survive and eat basic food, how many years back of humankind to produce that amount of food? Do you understand my question? 10 billion people has to eat basic food, right? You have to produce them. How many years back of the accumulated food production will you need to feed them? For 40 years for them to survive. Can you guess? Anybody? Okay, I have to go from here, this lady over there. Can I ask you, how many years do you think? How many years back? How many years of accumulation of the food production? The lady was, oh, yeah, yes, that's right. How many years? Sorry? 10 or 15 years, okay, to survive 40 years. So what, how many years? Okay, is there anybody else to volunteer? Okay, how many do you think it's more than 100 years? More than 100 years, okay. So how many people? 200 years. How many people? 500 years. Okay, so the gentleman with blue mask, how many years? More than 200 and less than 500, right? So what do you think? 400 years? Yeah. About 400? We have to add 1 more 0. 4,000 years food production we would need to feed 1 minute. So, where do we get this food? We have abandoning 30% of our food production, throw it away. But even so, it's an enormous amount of the food we need. And food security, safe food. Do you know Africa has 60% of unused arable land in the world? China would like to dig the entire African continent and bring that soil over there. Right? No, seriously, I mean, many presidents of African countries are worried. So you have all this potential. And now more than 30% of the population is middle class, and their lifestyle is changing. It's an enormous market there. So my vision is to Africa. Think about Africa, how you are going to relate with them. In 50 years' time, you will face that. So, having said that, let me give you on the personal messages, because world is made by individuals, okay? World is not made by the group of a bunch of people to move from here to there. No, world is made by individuals. Each one of you are a part of that world. So what you do, how you're going to select what to do, in my view, is very important. And my message is based on my life story. Okay? So first, believe in yourself. Don't believe in many other people try to pull you down. Believe in yourself. Trust your capacity. And you must know who you are, where you are coming from, what you represent, a country or ethnic group or gender. You have to think that. Now, another thing, don't try to go the shortcut. You know, you want to grab that, so you go straight. Life is not like that. Life is, you want there, but never straight. The path is always going around and round and round, and you say, when will I get that? But there is a reason why you're going longer way, because in each road, you will find obstacles, disappointment, challenges, pain, sadness, but you will have also happiness. And it is only through you go through the challenges and difficulties, you will gain your own strength. You can't gain strength or survival skills without going through the difficulties and pains and challenges. So don't be afraid. Go to the place where a lot of challenges and difficulties are. Don't escape and try to go in a shortcut. The third message to you is don't ever give up. You know, people tend to like to give up. It's easy to give up, but be persistent, continue your effort, because that itself is a power of yourself. Now the fourth, anything has two interpretations, two sides of the coin. It may look this side, if you look at purple color, this side is red, the other side is blue. And the red side, you are so disappointed, disheartened. But maybe because you are in a difficulties, you can turn around to make it positive and opportunity. So any crisis and difficulties, there is always opportunities, but it's up to you to find it. And for that, your attitude is very important. Finally, the title of this my talk today is the role and responsibility of citizens in the international community and global society. You are linked to the rest of the world. You may think you sit in the bathroom and say, I'm alone. No, you're sitting on the toilet. Toilets are made by factories. In the factory, there are many people who are working to make the toilet. There are people working in the mine to get the material to make the toilet. You are linked, whether you like it or not, you are linked to the rest of the world. And that link is becoming more and more critical for the shaping of the world and the future. There are two ways of your attitude, two methods and two approaches. One is think locally, then act globally. Think globally, then act locally. Two ways. Both of them are linked. You take, for instance, the problem of the climate change. You say, well, in Japan and other places, why are we going to have, we are having so much natural disasters, you know, forest fires. Locally, what's going on? You go to the sea, there are lots of garbage around there. What's going on? We have to act globally and say, we have to reduce the emission, make this global warning truth to you. We got to do something globally, act on that. Another approach is think globally. Oh, in order to make the world better, in order to make this Mother Earth better for survival of us, what do we have to do locally? Instead of throwing the garbage out, instead of using the plastic, you have other ways to do locally. So these are the two approaches in when you are entering, you're going out from this room. Please think two approaches to the reality. So my lecture stops there, but I'd like to say you are the future of the world. You make the world, each one of you. You act not only for yourself, but act for the rest of the world. And you will find happiness in that. Thank you very much.
So, it's a Q&A time, so, like Alicia is gonna go around to take your questions.
Ask me difficult questions that will make me strong, you know? Okay, so questions. I'm waiting for good, interesting, and difficult questions. Make my life miserable by asking questions. I love it, you know? Okay, the lady over there. Okay.
So you know the vaccine nationalism and just rising.
Vaccine?
Yeah, so vaccine nationalism, I want to see how like geopolitical factors are linked to it one way or another. Do you think we'll be able to get back to being multilateral? Or like do you see events happening in the near future that will suggest that?
Would you somebody explain the question itself because I can't hear with your mask?
Yeah.
Can you,
So you know how with vaccine nationalism, we can see how geopolitics are worsening with like
vaccine?
Asia, yeah,
Mhm.
getting Russian vaccine or Chinese vaccine,
Right.
Western them getting Western vaccines and whatnot.
Right.
Do you envision that they would be an event in the nearest future that would push us toward multilateralism? Or do you think that there's no point of return?
Whether this is going back to multilateralism or what, I don't really get the last part of the
Do you
question.
think we'll start working together as all countries, or do you see the division between China versus
Oh,
the US sharpening
I see.
even more?
Difficult question. Of course, there are so many different products, right? But I think most important part is how we face with the problem. That has to come first, meaning that we are trying to combat Corona, right? And Corona is also fighting against us and trying to expand to different forms. We have to first think that first. What we are supposed to, how are we going to prevent this? How are we going to save humankind? And this issue of Pfizer or Moderna, Johnson Johnson, does it really matter? We have to be thankful that you could do the vaccine. Because look at how many people on this earth, maybe 90%, maybe more than 90% of the entire world do not have access to vaccine. Somebody has to point out the importance and fortunateness of we having access to vaccine. And that's why we need global movement. Look at the issues on a global sense. Because for instance, even if Japan is get 100% vaccinated, if the neighboring countries of Korea, Taiwan, or China, or Philippines are not getting better, inevitably we are contacting them. We can't solve the world problem by solving only your own country. So you have to have a larger scope and a perception of a large world. What you can do as an individual. I hope I answered the question. Okay. Yes, the gentleman over there.
Thank you. I didn't, can you hear me?
Very difficult, very difficult. But it's
So-
better you do that because this is recorded and there are many people, hopefully, in Japan also are going to listen to the recording. So we need that microphone.
As long as they're not from China, I'll speak. So first of all, thank you very much. It's a fantastic talk. I really appreciate your enthusiasm, your work you've done for the United Nations. My question is, you mentioned how the United Nations helped establish legitimate countries by recognizing their sovereignty. However, it's sovereignty that seems to be holding back many of the things that the United Nations needs to do. how is the United Nations dealing with this notion of sovereignty and how it is kind of harming or not particularly helping when it comes to COVID or climate change and issues like that?
I think that is the challenge of United Nations. Because United Nations is supposed to respect sovereignty of each country. But if you look at the issue of Syria, if you look at issue of Afghanistan, what is United Nations doing? What is United States doing? These in-country conflicts are not in-country issue. It is multilateral forces coming into that country that makes the situation even worse. I'm glad I retired from UN so I can speak as I want. Really, if these countries surrounding, I look at Syria, it's a mess of international community. So many cooks are coming in there. Russians are coming in there, Russia is coming, US is coming, France is coming. You know, and where is the voice of its own country? As I said, each individual, each one of you are related to the rest of the world. At the country level, it's the same thing. How the country is governed. And you're no longer really governed by the people in it. There's an international power structure and the fights are influencing what's going on in the country. Many African countries, when they have independence war, it was coinciding with Cold War. Soviet Union is feeding one ethnic group of particular country to fight with other ethnic group, which is fed by the United States. It's not only the country themselves fights within the country. Definitely, it reflects the world power structure. China is very strongly coming into Africa. And many people ask me, what's the difference between Japan and Africa in Africa? Japan and China in Africa. You know, China, under the Cold War, were together with Soviet Union. Many of the current top leaders of African countries were educated in Moscow, Pyongyang, Beijing. They had already political relationship with African countries under the Cold War. So when the Cold War finished, China was invisible there. And during that period, China had enormous economic growth. At the same time of the growing population, they had to come with a solution how to deal with that. And they went and they are going to Africa for the resources. But this seems to be like an economic action and economic relationship, but it isn't. It started from the Cold War with a political relationship on the ground. So if you take Japan, it's a totally different picture altogether. Japan never had a political relationship with Africa. Japan had only the commercial relationship, okay, television, stereo, Toyota car, 70% of the car on the continent is Toyota car. You know, it's only commercial. So it's a totally different standing. So what I'm trying to say to you is that countries are not alone. Countries are related to the global structure. And shall we then stop the global intervention? No, we have to have the global mind. Because, for instance, like human rights, it's difficult. But if the global society do not push forward human rights and punish, for instance, the Security Council has a list of the kidnappers, the ones who grab their girls, and created the agreement. We have a list of these people, and the Security Council will make a sanction against these individuals. We can act together to make the society better by global setting. So that is my answer to you.
Thank you. I really appreciate your sharing your experiences with us. But my question, I think you addressed it partially in that last question you answered. And that's the issue of global structure. And I would also like to add self-interest or maybe greed. I'm happy you mentioned the explosion of the internet and how young people in African nations are using the Wi-Fi, internet, and so on. And they are really poised to take over the, or to change the political structure of their various countries, respective countries. Because when we talk of independence, yes, 60s to 80s, many African countries got political independence, but they did not get economic independence. And as it was then, so it continues now, and it's getting worse. What hope do these young people have in African nations to really meaningfully change the political structure of their country when the UN is still dominated by these powers, the initial powers that come, and they are not ready to relinquish the power? In the same way, I believe they are not ready to relinquish the economic ropes and ties that they have on African nations.
Thank you very much. This is a very, very important issue. I have been in the UN and being categorized as an enemy country, and the power continues. The Security Council, you still have veto. It's really, really disturbing. The solution to this for Africa is to have solidarity of Africa, African Union African continent, that you will have the continent now. This year, I think in February, African Union adopted the continental free trade zone agreement. That the African countries, like in Europe, the African countries are small economies. In order to have economy to be vital and competitive, you have to have a certain size of the economy. And the Western power deliberately divided the African continent to be small. What Africa has to do, in my view, is to have a consolidation of Africa, first by regional economic communities, because you can't go to 54 countries in Africa to be united as a country, because it's complicated because of the outer power coming in. But there is a recognition among African leaders, as I see it, that they have to have their own power building and leverage to be a part of the international community and demand what Africa wants and Africa is going, so that the rest of the world will have the ear to listen. There is no ear to listen right now. It is only when Africa itself will demonstrate its own power, economically and politically. In order to do that, consolidation, unification of the African continent is a key. But you can't do that of such a huge continent and diversity So regional economic communities, they have been working hard for the last 30, 40 years to come up with the integration of sub-regional region and sub-region to at the end ultimately combine the all efforts together. You know that African diaspora, meaning outside of the African continent, they send money remittances to African countries. And the amount of that remittance is difficult to trace because it's informally done. But according to World Bank, I don't know whether you trust this or not, according to the World Bank, the amount of remittance coming to continent is at least more than entire ODA. You have Africans outside try to also help the African economy to boost because there is a huge potential for that. Within Africa, instead of trying to just do export orientation, economy, they should really do intra-regional trade and investment. So that instead of going somewhere else of the continent and buy things, you get something within African continent. It is a time to have continental independence, and you can do it because you have people, you have resources. It is a matter of how to organize this, and that's a role of leaders, African leaders. And I have at least a sense of positive trend of African leaders on this realization.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the thoughtful questions and the amazing, powerful lecture. I was so inspired, believing myself, learning professionality with all the leaders. So anyways, I'd like to conclude this part of this discussion, but after this, thanks to Global Business School, which helped us to cater great food, and we have reception so that you have time to spend with Professor Ikegame and Shibata. So I wanted to thank Global Business Studies and other sponsors, as well as we have a great live music by Yuka Naito, who is a Japanese language coordinator, but nicely really talented musician. So please stay and enjoy your time. Thank you so much for coming.